Marcus Thompson was not your typical CEO. He wasn't the kind of man who sat in a glass-walled office disconnected from the world below. Instead, Marcus prided himself on staying grounded. Even though he had built Elite Threads, a chain of high-end clothing stores that catered to fashion-forward individuals, he never lost sight of where he came from. Growing up in a modest neighborhood, Marcus knew what it felt like to be overlooked and underestimated. Those experiences shaped him into the leader he was today, someone who valued hard work, integrity, and fairness above all else. Elite Threads had started as a small boutique in Marcus's hometown, but over the years it grew into something much bigger. With locations popping up across the country, the brand became synonymous with luxury and style. Customers raved about the quality of the clothes, the sleek design of the stores, and the attentive service they received, or at least that's what Marcus thought. Lately, however, whispers of dissatisfaction had begun to reach his ears. Some customers claimed they weren't treated well at certain stores. These complaints were rare, but when they did come in, they troubled Marcus deeply. One evening, as Marcus sat in his home office reviewing quarterly reports, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from a customer named Lisa, who had visited the downtown Chicago location of Elite Threads. In her message, she described how she'd been ignored by staff members during her entire shopping trip. "I stood there for 10 minutes, waiting for someone to help me," Lisa wrote. "But every time I tried to get their attention, they acted like I wasn't even there. When I finally asked for assistance, they barely acknowledged me. It was humiliating." Marcus leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. This wasn't the first time he'd heard such feedback, but it hit harder now because Lisa was black, just like him. Was this a coincidence? Or was there a deeper issue lurking beneath the surface? The thought gnawed at him. As the founder of Elite Threads, Marcus believed strongly in creating spaces where everyone felt welcome. If some customers were being treated poorly based on their appearance, then he needed to address it immediately. But how could he find out if these allegations were true? Marcus didn't want to jump to conclusions without evidence. After tossing around ideas in his mind, he landed on a bold plan. He would go undercover. By visiting one of his own stores incognito, Marcus could see firsthand how employees interacted with customers, especially those who looked like him. The idea excited and terrified him in equal measure. What if his worst fears were confirmed? What if the people working under his name were perpetuating the very biases he worked so hard to dismantle? The next morning, Marcus woke up early and dressed carefully. He chose a simple pair of jeans, a plain hoodie, and sneakers. Nothing flashy or expensive. His goal was to blend in, to look like any other shopper walking through the doors of his store. Before leaving the house, he caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror. Without his usual tailored suit and polished shoes, he almost didn't recognize the man staring back at him. For a moment, he wondered if anyone would believe he was the same Marcus Thompson, whose face appeared in magazine spreads and billboards promoting Elite Threads. When Marcus arrived at the downtown Chicago store, he paused outside the entrance. Through the large glass windows, he could see rows of impeccably arranged clothing racks and shelves stocked with accessories. A few customers wandered between displays, browsing casually. Everything seemed normal, pristine even, but appearances could be deceiving. Taking a deep breath, Marcus pushed open the door and stepped inside. The familiar scent of fresh fabric and cologne greeted him as he entered. Soft jazz music played in the background, adding to the upscale atmosphere. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. Employees moved about the store, straightening hangers and assisting customers. But as Marcus began to explore, he quickly realized that something was off. No one approached him. Not a single employee greeted him or offered help. They walked past him as though he were invisible. Marcus wandered over to a rack of designer jackets, pretending to browse while keeping an eye on the staff. He watched as a young white couple entered the store. Within seconds, a sales associate hurried over to them, smiling warmly. "Hi there. Can I help you find anything?" the employee asked enthusiastically. The couple nodded, and the associate led them toward a display of premium suits. Meanwhile, Marcus stood alone, still clutching the same jacket he'd picked up. 5 minutes earlier. Feeling increasingly uneasy, Marcus decided to test the situation further. He walked to another section of the store, this time heading toward the shoe aisle. As he scanned the shelves, he noticed a group of teenagers laughing and trying on sneakers nearby. An employee hovered close by, chatting with them and making recommendations. Yet when Marcus reached out to touch a pair of loafers, the same employee shot him a wary glance before moving away. By now, Marcus was starting to feel frustrated. He reminded himself that this experiment wasn't personal. It was research. Still, it stung to realize that his presence in his own store elicited no recognition, no warmth, and certainly no respect. Determined to gather more information, Marcus continued exploring. He picked up a scarf here, examined a belt there, all while noting the consistent lack of interaction from the staff. After about 20 minutes, Marcus decided to take things a step further. He approached a sales associate standing near the cash register and asked politely, "Excuse me, do you know where I can find men's dress shirts?" The associate, a middle-aged woman with perfectly styled hair, barely glanced at him. "Over there," she said curtly, pointing vaguely toward the back of the store. Then, without another word, she turned her attention to a white customer standing nearby. Marcus bit back his irritation and headed in the direction she'd indicated. Along the way, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being judged. Not for who he was, but for what people assumed he represented. The hoodie and sneakers he wore might have signaled not a serious shopper to some, but Marcus knew better. Clothes didn't define worth, and assumptions shouldn't dictate treatment. Yet here he was, experiencing exactly that. As he browsed through the shirt selection, Marcus reflected on the irony of the situation. He had poured his heart and soul into building elite threads, ensuring that each location exuded elegance and professionalism. And yet, in this moment, he felt anything but valued. The experience was sobering. It forced him to confront uncomfortable questions about his company, his leadership, and the society in which they operated. Little did Marcus know, this was only the beginning of his journey. What he uncovered that day would challenge everything he thought he knew about his business and himself. As Marcus continued to move through the store, his initial frustration began to mix with a growing sense of unease. He had expected some level of indifference. After all, he wasn't dressed in the sharp suits or polished shoes that might signal wealth to others. But what he was experiencing went beyond mere oversight. It felt deliberate, almost calculated. Each time an employee passed by him, their eyes seemed to slide right over him, as if he were part of the scenery instead of a potential customer. Determined not to jump to conclusions too quickly, Marcus decided to push further. He moved toward the accessories section, where rows of leather belts and designer wallets were displayed under soft lighting. A young man browsing nearby caught the attention of one of the sales associates immediately. "Can I help you find anything?" the associate asked, his tone warm and inviting. The young man shook his head politely, but the associate lingered, offering suggestions about matching belts with shoes. All the while, Marcus stood just a few feet away, holding a wallet in his hand, yet no one acknowledged him. The contrast was stark. Here was a customer who hadn't even asked for assistance receiving personalized attention, while Marcus, who clearly appeared interested in making a purchase, was completely ignored. It was maddening, but Marcus reminded himself why he was there, to observe, not react. Still, it took every ounce of self-control not to call out the blatant double standard. To test whether this behavior was universal or limited to specific employees, Marcus wandered over to another area of the store, the shoe section. This time, he made sure to stand close enough to a group of customers and staff members so they couldn't possibly miss him. A mother and her teenage daughter were trying on sneakers, laughing as they compared styles. An employee knelt beside them, helping adjust laces and offering advice on sizing. Nearby, a businessman in a tailored suit browsed loafers, and within moments another associate approached him, asking if he needed help finding something specific. Marcus waited patiently, clutching a pair of sleek black Oxfords he'd picked up earlier. When no one came to assist him, he finally spoke up. "Excuse me, he said, his voice calm but firm. "Could you tell me more about these shoes? Are they available in different sizes?" The nearest sales associate turned to look at him, her expression unreadable. For a brief moment she hesitated as though deciding whether to respond at all. Then, with a clipped tone, she replied, "They're usually stocked in standard sizes. You can check online if we don't have what you need here." Before Marcus could ask anything else, she turned her back and walked away, leaving him standing there, holding the shoes awkwardly. It was infuriating, but Marcus refused to let his emotions get the better of him. Instead, he focused on gathering more evidence. He moved to the checkout counter where a line of customers waited to pay for their purchases. As he joined the queue, he noticed a young woman cutting in front of him without apology. The cashier barely glanced at Marcus, instead greeting the newcomer enthusiastically. "Hi, did you find everything okay?" she chirped, ringing up the woman's items before Marcus could say a word. Frustrated but determined, Marcus cleared his throat. "Actually, I was here first," he said, his voice steady despite the anger bubbling beneath the surface. The cashier looked at him briefly, her smile faltering for a split second. "Oh, sorry, I thought you were just looking around," she replied dismissively. Her words dripped with insincerity, and Marcus knew exactly what she meant. She hadn't mistaken him for someone casually browsing. She'd assumed he wouldn't buy anything because of how he looked. By now, Marcus's patience was wearing thin. He'd come to the store hoping to confirm or debunk rumors of poor treatment, but what he was witnessing was far worse than he'd imagined. Every interaction reinforced the same painful truth. His race and appearance were influencing how he was being treated. And this wasn't happening in some random shop. It was happening in his store, a place he had built from the ground up. As he stood there, gripping the shoes tightly in his hands, Marcus replayed the day's events in his mind. He thought about the young couple greeted warmly, the teenagers fawned over by staff, and the businessman assisted promptly. None of them had been subjected to the same cold indifference he faced. It wasn't fair, and it certainly wasn't right. Yet here he was, enduring it silently because he wanted to understand the full scope of the problem. But Marcus also knew that understanding wasn't enough. Observing bias was one thing, addressing it was another. As much as he wanted to confront the employees right then and there, he resisted the urge. This wasn't just about calling out individual actions, it was about uncovering systemic issues that needed to be fixed. If Marcus revealed his identity too soon, he risked shutting down any chance of honest reflection among his staff. So for now he remained silent, absorbing each slight and insult with quiet determination. Despite the hostility he encountered, Marcus found himself reflecting on the bigger picture. These employees weren't inherently bad people. They were products of a society riddled with stereotypes and assumptions. Somewhere along the way, they had internalized the idea that certain types of customers deserved priority treatment, while others didn't. Breaking that cycle wouldn't be easy, but Marcus knew it was necessary. His company prided itself on inclusivity and excellence, and this behavior flew in the face of those values. As the minutes ticked by, Marcus realized he couldn't stay in the store forever. He placed the shoes back on the shelf, careful not to draw attention to himself, and headed toward the exit. With each step, he felt a mixture of emotions swirling inside him: anger, disappointment, and resolve. Anger at the blatant discrimination he'd experienced, disappointment that his own company had allowed such attitudes to take root, and resolve to do whatever it took to make things right. When Marcus finally stepped outside into the cool air, he paused for a moment, letting the weight of the experience sink in. He glanced back at the store, its windows gleaming in the sunlight. To the casual observer, it looked like any other high-end boutique, a beacon of luxury and sophistication. But Marcus knew better. Beneath the polished exterior lay cracks that threatened to undermine everything he had worked so hard to build. With a deep breath, Marcus pulled out his phone and opened his calendar. There was work to be done, conversations to have, and changes to implement. This wasn't just about fixing a problem in one store. It was about transforming an entire culture. and Marcus was ready to lead the charge. What he didn't realize yet was how deeply this experience would impact not only his business but also the lives of everyone involved. Little did he know the real challenge was only beginning. Marcus left the store feeling a whirlwind of emotions. He was angry, yes, but more than that, he was deeply troubled. The day's events had shaken him in ways he hadn't anticipated. As he walked to his car, parked a block away, he replayed every interaction in his mind. The dismissive glances, the curt responses, the outright avoidance. Each memory felt like a weight pressing down on him. But amidst the frustration, Marcus couldn't ignore the clarity that was beginning to emerge. This wasn't just about one bad day or a few careless employees. It was bigger than that. And if he wanted to fix it, he needed to dig deeper. When Marcus arrived home later that evening, he didn't immediately sit down or relax. Instead, he headed straight to his office, a small, organized space filled with books, awards, and framed photos from his journey building elite threads. He powered up his laptop and opened the company's internal system, pulling up security camera footage from the downtown Chicago store. His hands hovered over the keyboard for a moment as he hesitated, almost afraid of what he might find. But curiosity and responsibility pushed him forward. If this issue was as widespread as it seemed, he needed proof, not just for himself but for the people who worked under him. The footage confirmed everything Marcus had suspected, and more. Watching the playback, he saw himself entering the store, browsing the racks and attempting to engage with employees. From an outsider's perspective, it looked painfully obvious. Marcus was being ignored while other customers received immediate attention. One clip showed him standing near a display of designer watches, clearly examining them, while two sales associates chatted casually nearby without so much as glancing in his direction. Another captured the moment when the cashier skipped over him to assist someone else entirely. But it wasn't just Marcus. Scrolling through older recordings, Marcus noticed patterns emerging. In several instances, black customers lingered in the background, waiting patiently for help that never came. Meanwhile, white shoppers were greeted warmly within moments of stepping inside. There were even cases where employees whispered to each other while looking pointedly at certain patrons, their body language suggesting discomfort or disdain. It was subtle, sure, but unmistakable once you knew what to look for. As Marcus reviewed the tapes, his heart sank. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was systemic. These employees weren't acting out of malice necessarily. They were reflecting ingrained biases that had somehow seeped into his company's culture, and as the CEO, Marcus bore responsibility for allowing it to happen. No matter how unintentional, the damage was real. Customers were walking away feeling unwelcome, and that was unacceptable. Determined to understand the scope of the problem, Marcus reached out to his human resources department. "I need a full report," he told HR manager Elena Martinez during their late-night call. "Pull every customer complaint we've received over the past year, especially those related to discrimination or poor treatment. I want to see exactly how widespread this is." Elena sounded surprised but quickly agreed. By morning, she sent Marcus a detailed spreadsheet outlining dozens of complaints, all from black customers who claimed they'd been mistreated at various elite threads locations. Some described being followed around the store as though they were suspected shoplifters. Others recounted experiences similar to Marcus's, ignored, dismissed, or spoken to rudely by staff members. Reading through the entries, Marcus felt a knot tighten in his stomach. How had he missed this? How had everyone missed this? It became clear to Marcus that addressing the issue wouldn't be simple. This wasn't a case of firing a few bad apples and moving on. Bias wasn't something you could stamp out overnight. It required education, awareness, and sustained effort. Still, Marcus refused to let fear of complexity stop him. If anything, the scale of the problem only strengthened his resolve. He owed it to his customers, his employees, and himself to make things right. Over the next few days, Marcus spent hours researching best practices for fostering inclusivity in the workplace. He read articles, watched interviews, and consulted experts in diversity training. The more he learned, the more he realized how much work lay ahead. Changing attitudes wasn't just about implementing new policies. It was about creating a cultural shift. Employees needed to feel empowered to speak up when they witnessed bias, and leadership needed to model the behavior they expected from others. With a clearer plan forming in his mind, Marcus called a meeting with his executive team. They gathered in the conference room at headquarters, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. When Marcus walked in, his usual confident demeanor was replaced with quiet determination. He laid out everything he'd discovered. The undercover visit, the security footage, the customer complaints. The room fell silent as his colleagues absorbed the information. "This isn't just a PR issue," Marcus said firmly. "This is about who we are as a company. We pride ourselves on being inclusive, but our actions, or lack thereof, are telling a different story. That ends now." His words resonated with the group, and soon ideas began flowing. One suggestion involved bringing in external consultants to lead mandatory workshops on unconscious bias and racial equity. Another proposed creating anonymous feedback channels where both employees and customers could report discriminatory behavior without fear of retaliation. Marcus nodded along, jotting down notes. These were good starting points, but he knew true change would require more than surface-level fixes. After the meeting, Marcus retreated to his office to reflect. Despite the gravity of the situation, he felt a flicker of hope. For all its flaws, Elite Threads was still a company built on strong values that had simply been overshadowed by complacency. Now, it was time to bring them back into focus. Marcus envisioned a future where every customer, regardless of race, gender, or socioeconomic status, felt welcomed and respected, where every employee understood the importance of treating others with dignity and fairness. It wouldn't happen overnight, but Marcus was willing to put in the work. The following week, Marcus made a bold decision. He would return to the downtown Chicago store, not undercover this time, but as himself. He wanted to confront the employees, directly to show them the impact of their actions and hold them accountable. More importantly, he wanted to send a message. No one was above scrutiny, not even the CEO. If Marcus expected his team to take responsibility for their behavior, he had to do the same. On the morning of the visit, Marcus dressed in his signature tailored suit, projecting the image of authority and confidence that people associated with him. As he drove to the store, he rehearsed what he planned to say. He knew the conversation wouldn't be easy for anyone, but it was necessary. Walking into the store, he braced himself for the reactions he was about to face. What happened next would leave everyone stunned, including Marcus himself. But as he pushed open the glass doors and stepped inside, he reminded himself of why he was doing this. This wasn't just about fixing a broken system. It was about rebuilding trust. And Marcus was ready to lead by example, no matter how difficult the road ahead might be. When Marcus walked into the downtown Chicago store that Monday morning, the atmosphere was markedly different from his undercover visit just days earlier. The store buzzed with activity, employees scurrying around, adjusting displays, folding clothes, and greeting customers. Everything seemed normal on the surface, but Marcus knew better. Beneath the polished exterior lay a culture that needed to be confronted head-on. Dressed in his signature tailored suit, Marcus strode through the entrance with an air of authority that immediately drew attention. Employees glanced up from their tasks, some recognizing him instantly while others hesitated, unsure if the man walking toward them could really be the CEO they'd seen in company newsletters and promotional videos. For a few seconds there was silence, a collective pause as everyone processed his presence. Then, one by one, they began to approach him cautiously, their expressions shifting from confusion to recognition. "Mr. Thompson?" A young sales associate asked tentatively. "Is that you?" Marcus nodded, offering a small smile. "Yes, it's me," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I need to speak with all of you. Can we gather in the back room for a meeting?" The request caught everyone off guard. Store meetings were typically scheduled well in advance, not called spontaneously by the CEO himself. Yet no one dared question him. Within minutes, the staff had congregated in the break room, a modest space filled with folding chairs and a long table cluttered with employee schedules and inventory sheets. As Marcus stood at the front of the room, he scanned the faces before him, young and old, seasoned employees and newcomers alike. Some looked nervous, others curious. None of them suspected what was coming next. "I'm here today because I've discovered something deeply troubling about this location," Marcus began, his tone measured but serious. "Something that goes against everything Elite Thread stands for." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "A few days ago I visited this store, not as your CEO but as a customer. I wanted to see firsthand how our team treats people who walk through these doors." At first, the employees exchanged puzzled glances. Surely their boss wasn't implying what they thought he was. But as Marcus continued detailing his experience step by step, the tension in the room grew palpable. He described how he'd been ignored while other customers received prompt assistance, how he'd been brushed off when he asked for help, how a cashier had skipped over him entirely to assist someone else. Each revelation hit like a punch, leaving the staff visibly shaken. To drive his point home, Marcus pulled out his laptop and projected security footage onto the wall behind him. The screen flickered to life, showing grainy but unmistakable images of Marcus wandering the aisles, standing alone while employees interacted with other shoppers. The contrast was stark. White customers greeted warmly. Black customers, including Marcus himself, left waiting or ignored altogether. Gasps rippled through the room as the truth unfolded before their eyes. "This isn't just about me," Marcus emphasized, turning back to face the group. "It's about every single person who walks into our stores feeling unwelcome because of the color of their skin. Look at this footage. Look at yourselves. Do you see what's happening? Do you understand how this makes people feel?" His voice cracked slightly on the last sentence, betraying the emotion beneath his composed exterior. For Marcus, this wasn't just business, it was personal. He had spent years building Elite Threads as a brand that celebrated diversity and inclusivity. To discover that those values were being undermined by his own employees was devastating. As the initial shock wore off, reactions among the staff varied. A few employees hung their heads in shame, unable to meet Marcus's gaze. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, clearly uneasy, but unwilling to admit fault. One older associate raised his hand hesitantly. "Sir," he said, his voice trembling, "I don't think anyone meant any harm. It's just, sometimes we make assumptions based on how people look. We're not trying to discriminate. It's not intentional." Marcus sighed deeply, running a hand over his face. He appreciated the honesty, but it wasn't enough. "Intent doesn't matter," he replied gently but firmly. "What matters is impact. Whether you mean to or not, your actions are hurting people. And when that happens under my name, under this company's name, it reflects poorly on all of us." He went on to explain that bias wasn't always obvious or deliberate. Often it operated beneath the surface, in subtle gestures, fleeting judgments, or unconscious decisions. That didn't excuse it. It simply made it harder to address. "We can't fix what we refuse to acknowledge," Marcus said. "So today, I'm asking each of you to take responsibility, not just for what happened to me, but for every customer who has ever felt marginalized in this store." To ensure accountability, Marcus outlined a series of steps the company would take moving forward. First, mandatory diversity and inclusion training would be implemented across all locations, starting with this one. Experts would lead workshops designed to help employees recognize and overcome their biases. Second, anonymous feedback systems would be introduced, allowing both customers and staff to report discriminatory behavior without fear of retaliation. Finally, Marcus announced that he would personally conduct unannounced visits to every Elite Thread store to monitor progress and hold teams accountable. By the time Marcus finished speaking, the mood in the room had shifted. The initial defensiveness had given way to reflection, and some employees even looked inspired. A young woman named Jasmine, who had been quietly observing throughout the meeting, spoke up. "I'm sorry for what happened," she said softly, "and I want to do better. Can you help us figure out how?" Her question brought a small smile to Marcus's face. "That's exactly why I'm here," he replied. "This isn't about punishment. It's about growth. Together we can create a culture where everyone feels valued and respected, but it starts with all of you taking ownership of this issue." As the meeting concluded, Marcus thanked the staff for their willingness to listen and promised to support them every step of the way. Walking out of the break room, he felt a mixture of relief and determination. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in days, Marcus believed real change was possible. Back in his car, Marcus allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. He thought about the challenges that lay ahead, the resistance he might face, the mistakes that would inevitably be made along the way. But he also thought about the potential for transformation. If handled correctly, this crisis could become an opportunity, not just to improve Elite Threads, but to set an example for other companies grappling with similar issues. Marcus knew that leadership wasn't about avoiding difficult conversations. It was about having them openly and honestly. By confronting the problem head-on, he had taken the first step toward healing. Now it was up to everyone else to follow suit. In the days following Marcus's visit to the downtown Chicago store, the ripple effects of his confrontation began to spread throughout Elite Threads. Word traveled fast within the company. After all, it wasn't every day that the CEO walked into a store unannounced, revealed himself as a mistreated customer, and demanded accountability from his own employees. For many staff members, the experience was humbling, even jarring. It forced them to confront uncomfortable truths about their behavior and attitudes, both individually and collectively. Marcus wasted no time putting his plans into action. Within a week, diversity and inclusion workshops were scheduled for every Elite Threads location, starting with the downtown Chicago team. Led by external consultants who specialized in racial equity and workplace bias, these sessions aimed to help employees recognize implicit biases and understand how they influenced interactions with customers. Marcus made it clear that attendance was mandatory, not optional. He wanted everyone on board, from entry-level associates to senior management. The first workshop took place in a rented conference space near the flagship store. Rows of chairs were set up facing a projector screen, and refreshments were laid out on a side table. When the employees filed in, there was an undercurrent of nervous energy. Some whispered anxiously about what to expect, others sat silently, avoiding eye contact. Marcus arrived early, taking a seat at the back of the room to observe. Though he didn't plan to participate directly, he wanted to ensure the message was delivered effectively. The facilitator, Dr. Lisa Chen, was a seasoned expert in organizational psychology, with years of experience helping companies navigate issues of bias and discrimination. She opened the session with a simple question: how many of you have ever felt judged based on something you couldn't control? Hands hesitated before slowly rising into the air. Dr. Chen nodded knowingly. That feeling stays with you, doesn't it? It shapes how you see the world and how you interact with others. From there, she dove into the concept of implicit bias, subconscious attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions without us realizing it. Using real-world examples and interactive exercises, Dr. Chen illustrated how bias could manifest in everyday situations. One particularly powerful exercise involved pairing participants together and having them describe a fictional customer, based solely on vague details like clothing or demeanor. The results revealed stark differences in perception depending on subtle cues: a hoodie versus a blazer, sneakers versus loafers. For the employees, the exercise hit close to home. Many realized how easily assumptions could creep into their work, influencing which customers they prioritized and which ones they overlooked. A few admitted openly that they had fallen into similar patterns during shifts, favoring customers who appeared affluent while ignoring those who didn't fit the mold. Admitting this aloud wasn't easy, but it was a crucial step toward breaking the cycle. Dr. Chen emphasized that recognizing bias was only the beginning. Awareness is important, she said, but it's not enough. You need tools to interrupt those automatic reactions when they happen. That means asking yourself questions like, why am I treating this person differently? Or would I act the same way if someone else were standing here? As the workshop progressed, the atmosphere shifted from tension to engagement. Employees started sharing personal stories, some painful, others hopeful. Jasmine, the young woman who had spoken up during Marcus's meeting, recounted an incident where she'd been followed around a department store as a teenager. "I remember feeling so small, like I didn't belong," she said softly. "And now I'm working in retail myself, and I don't want anyone else to feel that way because of me." Her words resonated deeply with the group, sparking conversations about empathy and responsibility. By the end of the session, many employees expressed a newfound commitment to doing better, not just for the sake of the company, but for themselves and the communities they served. Meanwhile, Marcus worked closely with HR to implement additional measures designed to foster inclusivity. Anonymous feedback systems were rolled out across all locations, allowing customers to report positive or negative experiences without fear of backlash. Employees were encouraged to use the platform as well, reporting incidents of bias they witnessed among colleagues. To further reinforce accountability, Marcus announced that performance reviews would now include evaluations of how staff treated customers, with specific attention paid to equitable service. Beyond formal policies, Marcus sought to create opportunities for ongoing dialogue. He introduced monthly town hall meetings where employees could voice concerns, share ideas, or simply connect with leadership. At the first gathering, held virtually to accommodate multiple locations, Marcus shared updates on the company's progress and reiterated his vision for Elite Threads. "We're building more than a business," he told the audience. "We're building a community, and that starts with treating each other and our customers with respect and dignity." The changes weren't universally embraced at first. Some employees pushed back, arguing that the new initiatives added unnecessary pressure to their already demanding jobs. Others worried about being unfairly scrutinized for honest mistakes. Marcus acknowledged these concerns but remained steadfast in his resolve. "Change is hard," he admitted during one Q&A session, "but staying silent isn't an option. If we truly believe in the values we claim to represent, then we have to live them every single day." To lead by example, Marcus continued making unannounced visits to stores across the country. Each trip gave him insight into how the new policies were being received and where improvements were still needed. In some locations, he found employees enthusiastically embracing the training and actively working to improve customer interactions. In others, resistance lingered, requiring more direct intervention. Through it all, Marcus maintained an open-door policy, encouraging honest feedback and offering support wherever possible. One particularly memorable visit occurred at a suburban branch outside Atlanta. As Marcus browsed the aisles, he noticed a young black customer struggling to get assistance with a pair of shoes. Instead of intervening immediately, Marcus waited to see how the situation unfolded. To his relief, a sales associate eventually approached the customer warmly, offering help and engaging in friendly conversation. Afterward, Marcus pulled the employee aside to commend her efforts. "That's exactly the kind of interaction we need more of," he said with a smile. "Thank you for setting the standard." By fostering moments like this, Marcus hoped to inspire a cultural shift, one rooted in kindness, fairness, and mutual respect. While progress was gradual, signs of improvement became increasingly evident. Customer satisfaction scores began to rise, and fewer complaints about discriminatory treatment filtered into HR. Employees reported feeling more empowered to speak up when they noticed problematic behavior, knowing their voices would be heard. Still, Marcus understood that true transformation required patience and persistence. Bias wasn't something that could be eradicated overnight. It was a persistent challenge that demanded constant vigilance. But as he reflected on the journey so far, Marcus felt a profound sense of pride. What had started as a painful revelation had evolved into a movement toward lasting change. Elite Threads was becoming more than just a clothing brand. It was becoming a beacon of inclusivity and integrity. Looking ahead, Marcus knew the work was far from over. There would always be setbacks, moments of doubt, and areas needing improvement. But for the first time in a long while, he felt confident that his company was heading in the right direction. Together, He and his team were proving that even the toughest challenges could be overcome with courage, honesty, and a shared commitment to doing better. Months had passed since Marcus Thompson's undercover visit to the downtown Chicago store, and the changes he implemented were beginning to take root. The journey hadn't been easy. There were moments of resistance, frustration, and even doubt. But the progress was undeniable. Elite Threads was slowly transforming into a company that not only preached inclusivity, but practiced it with intention and accountability. For Marcus, this wasn't just about fixing a problem. It was about creating a legacy. The diversity workshops, once met with apprehension, had become a cornerstone of the company culture. Employees who initially bristled at the idea of mandatory training now eagerly participated, sharing insights and strategies for improving customer interactions. Some stores even formed culture committees, groups of volunteers tasked with ensuring that inclusivity remained a priority in daily operations. These committees organized team-building activities, hosted discussions on social justice topics, and served as safe spaces for employees to voice concerns or suggest improvements. One of the most impactful initiatives came from Jasmine, the young associate who had spoken up during Marcus's initial meeting. Inspired by her own experiences with bias, she proposed a program called Customer First Conversations. The initiative encouraged employees to engage every shopper, not just those who appeared affluent, with genuine curiosity and care. Instead of asking generic questions like, "Can I help you?" staff members were trained to say things like, "What brings you in today?" or, "Is there anything special you're looking for?" These small shifts made a big difference, fostering connections rather than transactions. As word of these efforts spread, customers began to notice and respond. Positive feedback poured in through the anonymous feedback system, praising employees for their warmth and attentiveness. One review stood out to Marcus. "I've shopped at Elite Threads before, but my experience today was something else entirely. The staff treated me like family and I left feeling valued. Thank you for making such a beautiful change." Stories like this fueled Marcus's determination. He knew that while individual acts of kindness mattered, systemic change required sustained effort. To ensure long-term success, Marcus introduced quarterly audits to evaluate how well each location was implementing the new policies. Teams that excelled received recognition and rewards, while those struggling were given additional support and resources. This approach created healthy competition among stores, motivating everyone to strive for excellence. But Marcus didn't stop there. Recognizing the importance of representation, he launched a campaign to diversify Elite Threads marketing materials. Gone were the days of homogeneous models posing in sleek settings. Instead, advertisements featured people of all races, ages, and body types wearing the brand's clothing. Social media posts highlighted real customers sharing their stories, further emphasizing the message that everyone belonged at Elite Threads. The campaign resonated deeply with audiences, boosting sales and strengthening the company's reputation as a champion of inclusivity. Internally, Marcus continued to lead by example. His unannounced visits became legendary within the company, earning him both admiration and a touch of nervous anticipation from employees. But far from being intimidating, these drop-ins often turned into opportunities for connection. On one occasion, Marcus visited a store in Los Angeles and spent an hour chatting with staff about their challenges and triumphs. By the end of the YOI conversation, several employees confessed they felt more motivated and supported than ever before. Marcus also prioritized mentorship, pairing newer employees with seasoned veterans who embodied the values he sought to instill. These mentor-mentee relationships helped bridge generational gaps and fostered a sense of unity across the company. It wasn't uncommon to see older associates teaching younger ones the art of styling, while the younger generation introduced their mentors to emerging fashion trends. Together, they created a dynamic workplace where learning flowed both ways. Despite the strides Elite Threads had made, Marcus understood that complacency was the enemy of progress. He regularly reminded his team that inclusion wasn't a destination. It was a continuous process. During a town hall meeting near the end of the year, he addressed the entire company via video call. "We've accomplished so much," he said, his voice filled with pride. "But we can't stop here. There will always be room to grow, to listen, and to improve. Let's keep pushing ourselves to be better, not just for our customers, but for each other. His words struck a chord with employees, many of whom felt a renewed sense of purpose. They weren't just working for a clothing brand anymore. They were part of a movement. And as the holidays approached, that spirit of unity translated into action. Stores across the country partnered with local charities to donate clothing to families in need, host freestyling workshops, and sponsor community events. Customers responded enthusiastically, flooding social media with photos and testimonials celebrating the impact Elite Threads was making beyond its walls. For Marcus, the transformation extended far beyond business metrics. Watching his team embrace inclusivity with such passion reaffirmed his belief in the power of leadership to inspire change. He thought back to the day he walked into his own store feeling invisible, wondering if he'd built something truly meaningful. Now, standing on the other side of that experience, he realized he had done more than build a successful company. He had created a platform for growth, understanding, and connection. On New Year's Eve, Marcus sat in his home office reflecting on the past year. Outside, fireworks lit up the sky, signaling the start of a fresh chapter. Inside, he scrolled through photos sent by employees and customers alike. Smiling faces, heartfelt notes, and snapshots of communities coming together. Each image was a testament to the hard work and resilience of everyone involved. As he closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair, Marcus allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The road ahead would undoubtedly present new challenges, but he faced them with confidence. Elite Threads had weathered a storm and emerged stronger, more united, and more committed to its values than ever before. In the end, Marcus knew that true success wasn't measured by profit margins or accolades. It was measured by the lives touched along the way. And as he raised a glass to toast the new year, he did so with gratitude for the journey, hope for the future, and unwavering faith in the power of doing the right thing.